Having appeared in every entry to the series, sometimes as friend and sometimes as foe, Super Mutants have become synonymous with the Fallout universe. Hulking and massive, these giants are an unfortunate result of mankind's disastrous experiments with playing God. The Forced Evolutionary Virus, or FEV, is a pre-war megavirus that can severely alter DNA of human beings that are either injected or have heavy exposure to the virus. In technical terms, it copies DNA patterns, storing these patterns into exons. These exons, combined with the FEV, are re-injected into the host cells in a typical viral infectious fashion. This causes the host cells to regenerate their DNA. In a genetically viable individual, it rewrites portions of their DNA, causing accelerated mutation, which usually leads to recursive growth. In layman's terms, it transforms human beings into super mutants. In most cases, any original trace of the human being that they once were is now lost. The super mutant may retain some form of memory to who they once were, but the FEV mutation causes them to become an entirely new individual. But would it be possible to reverse the transformation and return super mutants to their original human forms? Can super mutants be cured? To begin, exposure to FEV is not a one-size-fits-all. If a human is not genetically viable, or if they're potentially already too ill, FEV will probably just kill them. They may still transform in some way or another, but they ultimately don't survive the process itself. The Forced Evolutionary Virus itself is stated to have many different strains. The version on the West Coast that created the Master is different to the one found in the Capital Wasteland, or the Commonwealth, with the mutants created on the East Coast possessing what seems to be a diminished intellectual capability. The question on whether or not FEV mutations can be reversed is able to be put to the Zach supercomputer located in Fallout 1. When asked if FEV mutation could be corrected with a countervirus, the Zach states no, claiming that FEV does not retain unaltered original copies of the subject's DNA. Only a virus which reinfected the subject with their original DNA could reverse its effects. Additionally, there's no way to remove the FEV itself, according to the computer. In Fallout 2, Dr. Henry is working on what he describes as a mutagenic serum. Dr. Henry believes that mutancy is not absolute, and is able to be cured. He states that his serum causes a regression in the genetic matrix that results in the destabilization and assimilation of aberrant DNA, leaving the host free of mutagenic potential. The intent was ultimately to cause the host to reject the mutant DNA, leaving behind only the original DNA still available. The result was unfortunately that injected mutants were left as a green sludge on the footpath. However, hope for mutant kind took a turn with Fallout 4. A former Institute scientist, Brian Virgil, had led the organization's program within the Bioscience Division, specifically for their FEV program. To this end, scores of Commonwealth residents were kidnapped, injected with FEV, and released back to the surface upon their transformation. Having been racked with guilt for the part he played in the whole process, Brian sought to shut down the project. He destroyed much of the research lab before taking the drastic step to purposefully transform himself into a super mutant. The reason for this was to escape into the highly radioactive glowing sea for the purpose of escaping Institute retribution. However, before his escape, he had created an experimental serum, one that would reverse his condition and allow him to become human again. Upon injecting the serum, Virgil was shown to reverse back to his human form within the space of 3 days. Now, ultimately, this is a quantifiable answer to the question, can super mutants be cured? With the answer being, technically yes. However, it is important to unpack Virgil's particular case to understand why it had worked compared to other attempts. Virgil states outright that the serum would only counteract the particular strain of FEV that he had injected himself with. It would have either a disastrous or no effect on another super mutant. The Zach's computer in Fallout had also stated that FEV could only be reversed if the subject was reinfected with their original DNA, in essence, forcing the Forced Evolutionary Virus out of the host's core genetic DNA. It is ultimately only possible to cure the condition if the host's original DNA, such as tissue samples, are backed up and still available. Nearly every super mutant in existence was an unwilling subject, a human who was forcefully injected against their will with FEV and subsequently transformed as a result of this. It would be extremely unlikely for any sample of their untainted DNA to still be available in any shape or form. Super mutants created on the West Coast and those in the Capital Wasteland would effectively have almost no hope of ever being transformed back to their original selves, even if they wanted to. It may be potentially different in the Commonwealth, however. Virgil does state that he plans to generalise the formula if possible, but currently does have a working serum when combined with the original host DNA. Potentially, if the Institute had kept extensive records of each Wastelander accompanied by their original organic matter, and if they were so inclined, super mutants could be rounded up and injected with the catered serum tailored to their DNA. So, as stated before, we ultimately do have the answer to the question, can super mutants be cured? Which, yes, in very specific circumstances. The follow-up question to this is, if it is right to do so. Virgil states after his successful transformation that the serum had provided a starting block for a broader cure for super mutancy. Although it may take decades, Virgil strives towards generalizing the formula to begin the process of reversing the damage caused by the program he had led. However, if the player has Strong as a companion, this can open up some interesting dialogue.
Wait, you want to make more? Turn more super mutants human?
Ultimately, yes.
No, no more. Super mutants not want to be human. You not change me. You not change anyone.
Strong would no doubt object to the idea entirely. Unlike other super mutant companions such as Fawkes or Marcus, Strong is outward about his belief that super mutants are a superior race than humans. He only travels with the sole survivor in his quest to obtain the milk of human kindness that allows humanity to be powerful, with the intent to then use this power against mankind itself. It's an ironic twist of fate that the closest real-world example to the milk of human kindness he could find in the world is actually the serum itself. Strong's mentality would likely be similar to every other super mutant able to be located in the Commonwealth. Although they had been transformed against their will, their identity is now that of a super mutant. The Institute had no right to play God with their experiments, transforming them against their will from human to super mutant, but does Virgil have the same right to transform them back? Virgil at least has the memories of his previous humanity, but if he was to transform Strong back to the man, or woman, that Strong originally was, they wouldn't immediately reclaim their past personality. They would essentially just be Strong in a human body, and Strong would no doubt be pissed off, just he'd now be less likely to cause much damage since he's a weak human and not a super mutant. In the examples of benevolent super mutants such as Fawkes or Marcus, I imagine they too would be reluctant to change. Fawkes labels himself as a meta-human rather than a super mutant, with part of his benevolence stemming from his acceptance of his form and the utilization of said form for the purpose of good. Marcus's identity is that of a super mutant. When probed on his pre-mutant life, Marcus states, "My memories of being a human aren't as clear as they once were, but I remember pettiness, hatred, jealousy. I prefer being a mutant." As such, while the exercise of curing super mutants of their conditions is a noble one, it's a task which would ultimately be thankless. Even if Virgil creates a serum that is able to be used on a large population of super mutants, the vast majority wouldn't want to transform back, and are unlikely to thank him once they are transformed back to humans anyway. It would be an enormous undertaking that, while interesting as a thought experiment, most likely would not be that feasible. After all, Wastelanders will say that they discovered the cure for super mutants centuries ago. Their prognosis: a swift bullet through the skull.